Today's topic is the drug MDMA, more commonly known as ecstasy. Let's identify some established facts about this drug, then consider some myths about ecstasy. We know that ecstasy is a stimulant with mild hallucinogenic properties. Chemically, it is similar to the stimulant methamphetamine and the hallucinogen mescaline. MDMA is a Schedule I substance, an illegal drug with no medical purpose and high potential for abuse. But ecstasy use is climbing, especially among young people. On the street, it is known by various names, including the hug drug. Current scientific research reveals an alarming array of both short-term and long-term consequences of its use. The effects of MDMA on the body are similar to those of amphetamines. Unfortunately, many Americans are learning about ecstasy primarily through the popular media. While public education in this way can be effective, we see too little mention of the harms of ecstasy use, and some media coverage seemingly glamorizes ecstasy. But before we get an update on the trafficking of ecstasy, let's hear a welcoming message from the Deputy Director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, Dr. Donald Vereen.
As the Deputy Director of ONDCP, I see alarming statistics about this drug every day. Last year, the Monitoring the Future study indicated that 51% of 12th graders said they thought ecstasy was easy to get, up sharply from the 40% who said so in 1999. This was the largest one-year percentage increase in the availability measure among 12th graders for any drug class in the 26-year history of this study. Equally troubling among 8th graders, past month use increased 75% between 1999 and 2000, and past year use increased 82%. As a parent, I am alarmed. When I look at my children and their friends, I see endless possibilities before them. Right now, every good thing that life has to offer is available to them. Anything that they want to be is within reach. Will they be able to realize their potential? Or will our culture have convinced them to risk their hopes, their dreams, and possibly their very lives for a fleeting drug-induced high? I urge you to work with me to see that the future holds promise for all our children.
Methylenedioxymethamphetamine, known as MDMA for short, is a mind-altering synthetic drug that was first discovered in the early 1900s. Today, MDMA is clandestinely manufactured in Western Europe. The cost of producing a single tablet is between 50 cents and $1. The huge profits that are made by selling this illegal drug has attracted organized crime groups. To understand how much is coming into the United States, consider this. The U.S. Customs Service seized very little MDMA 5 years ago. In 1997, they seized 400,000 tablets. In 1999, 3.5 million tablets, and in 2000, over 9 million tablets. Once MDMA reaches the United States, it is aggressively marketed. Here it is known as ecstasy, a name that means overwhelming emotion or rapturous delight. It is also known as the love drug and the hug drug, and is said to promote feelings of love, closeness, and empathy. Ecstasy increases awareness of the senses and is marketed as a way to enhance the techno music experience at raves and clubs. Loud, pounding music, psychedelic lights, and glow sticks are all part of the scene. Young people are willing to pay between $25 and $40 for the tablet that costs under $1 to manufacture. Huge profits can also be made from the sale of ecstasy paraphernalia. Since ecstasy may cause an increase in body temperature and dehydration, bottled water is sold at prices far above normal. Pacifiers to alleviate teeth clenching, glow sticks to enhance the visual experience, mentholated rub to smear on the inside of surgical masks to open the bronchia. These are some of the things sold along with ecstasy. Manufacturers imprint the tablets with designer labels to make them more attractive. Ecstasy. People are making a lot of money by selling this drug to our kids. Is it worth the price?
Let me begin then by introducing our first guest today, Dr. Glenn Hansen, who is Director of Neuroscience and Behavioral Research at the National Institute on Drug Abuse. What's the allure of ecstasy use?
Well, there are two principal actions that they're looking for. At low doses with ecstasy, they get the hallucinogenic impact. And then at higher doses, they start to see the stimulant effect, and that combination is very appealing. There's some euphoria that comes with this. There is this energizing impact that the drug can cause. There seems to be some changes in terms of memory. There is this feeling of affection and warmth and love that these people often describe. Or there are temperature effects. This can alter the body's ability to regulate temperature, and so we see under especially hot conditions what we call hyperthermia, which means body temperature goes up, and it goes up in a serious way. This drug has an effect on the muscles, and it causes the muscles to contract, and that's why they get this teeth grinding effect.
So there's some pretty serious short-term negative consequences for ecstasy use. What about the longer-term consequences?
We know that it can cause addiction. And a lot of people used to say that addiction and dependence doesn't happen with ecstasy, but we know now that it certainly can with moderate to heavy use. We do know that there are actual changes that take place in the brain. When we say addiction is a disease, we really mean it is a disease. It is a pathology. There are things happening to the function of the brain cells as well as to the basic chemistry of the brain that actually overlaps with other well-known neurological and psychiatric disorders. Well, addiction, we see the same sorts of things happening to brain function. We can't argue anymore. Science says this is a disease, and we have to approach it as we're dealing with the disease. We've also seen indications that there may actually be neurotoxicity, and this is a fancy way of saying that the drug has damaged the brain in some way and has compromised its ability to function. And so people have used large doses of ecstasy, complain about memory loss. They have some difficulty in processing information and dealing with complex situations. And going back to school, sometimes it's hard for them to learn at the same level that they used to learn before they were using the drug.
Are these effects reversible?
The question becomes, can you restore, or can those brain cells recover from what's taken place? And we think that they probably can, but our experience with high doses of ecstasy has been fairly limited and fairly short. In the late 1990s, we've seen this dramatic increase in the use of ecstasy, and that can be measured in a variety of different ways. And one of those ways has to do with emergency admissions into hospitals. Over the last 2 and 3 years, those emergency admissions have just skyrocketed. So they're telling us two things. First of all, they're telling us that more people are using it, and secondly, they're telling us that they're using more of it, which would predict that we're going to see more long-term consequences and possible brain damage.
Is ecstasy as received in the street pure, or is it mixed with other drugs?
It's a major concern because it clearly is mixed. It can be mixed with other stimulants. You can have some methamphetamine in there. It can be mixed with hallucinogens such as LSD or PCP or angel dust. It could be mixed with depressants. You could, of course, the alcohol issue is always involved, and a lot of this we don't understand. We don't know how these drugs might interact with each other, what their short-term, long-term consequences might be, or in an emergency situation, how do you deal with that? What do you treat? Which of these drugs are going to be the major problem for maintaining normal vital signs?
So ecstasy on the street may be a combination of ecstasy and several other drugs. So, but even if it's pure ecstasy, that doesn't mean it's safe, correct?
That's absolutely true. Ecstasy is not a trivial drug. It has very powerful pharmacological actions. It changes body systems, brain systems, as well as cardiovascular systems in a fairly profound way that certainly gives us cause for alarm.
That's very interesting. Thanks for that very valuable information. I'd now like to introduce our next guest, an expert in the area of prevention and treatment, Dr. Sandra Putnam from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. Can you tell us a little about the broader public health consequences of drug use?
We tend to take a public health approach to drug problems because it's a model that has the idea of focusing on health issues and consequences to health, both of individuals and the community. So the strategies might be educational to increase our knowledge and understanding of drugs. Another example would be training teachers and church officials, school officials in recognizing and screening for alcohol and other drug use. And finally, of course, law enforcement strategies are important, but demand reduction involves the environment and changing the environment, not just the person, not just the accessibility of the drugs, but the environment. So those messages, changing, for example, neighborhoods so that they don't include crack houses, so that they don't, mobilizing communities so that they don't allow raves well into the night with very young kids attending, maybe curfews, whatever, but the community decides.
So public investments in treatment, for example, really benefit us all, whether we use drugs or not.
Absolutely. It's not just the addicted person, it's the experimenter. It's the kid that's just starting out, never used before, tries it, likes it, feels part of the group, and it's those kids that we need to get to and include in our thinking when we think about prevention and treatment.
In that public health model you talked about, where do parents fit?
Well, parents are are part of the system in the sense that I see them as gatekeepers, like school officials and other gatekeepers, hospital emergency room officials. They can identify, screen, and refer to treatment their children. And just like professionals do, they need to be aware of the symptoms. They need to be objective, get out of denial as much as possible, even though it's your child and your child can't be on drugs, your child can be.
So it's really a combination of approaches that are rooted in the community. So part of it is changing the physical environment, part of it is the cultural and social environment.
Exactly
plus
right.
Education, et cetera. Now we want to talk to two young people who have actually used ecstasy in the past. They've both been through treatment, they've both been clean for different periods of time. So we want to hear firsthand from them what the experience of ecstasy was. Let's start with Katie. Here's some background on Katie. Katie was an overachiever from the start. She was a straight A student, a class officer, a cheerleader, and a dancer since age 3. She even won the $100,000 Star Search Prize with a dance group in 1994. Katie began drinking and experimenting with drugs, starting with ecstasy. She tried to kill herself, overdosed 4 more times, was jailed twice, and was in and out of rehab. Finally, her own mother had her arrested on a felony charge, where the judge ordered her to a residential treatment facility for up to 2 years. Katie, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And Adam, let me also welcome you. How did you get involved in ecstasy?
I was a normal teenager. I wanted to belong, and most of the people around me were using ecstasy, and it was just so freely available. And I started going to the clubs, and that's where I tried ecstasy for the first time.
So you were, to some degree, involved in the rave scene, at least going to clubs and first exposed to it there.
In the beginning, that was where I was first exposed, and I loved it from then on. You know, it started occasionally, and then I began using it all the time.
Were you using more and more ecstasy, or just more frequently?
Well, in the beginning, the effect was much more intense, and after a while, it was like I developed a tolerance to it, and I had to take more, larger amounts to get the same feeling. And after a while, you know, it just didn't work altogether, and I had to move to stronger substances to, you know, get that feeling.
You moved on to another drug? What drug was that?
I began using heroin and pain pills.
What effects, negative effects, were you getting from ecstasy?
I lost a lot of interest in school. So school, you know, I stopped going. I stopped getting good grades. I dropped out of the curricular activities I like to do. You know, the dancing, the cheerleading. I stopped doing that stuff. My friends changed completely. My attitude was awful. My family was, you know, harmed because of my attitude, and I just hurt a lot of people, and long term, a lot of stuff, you know, too. I suffer short-term memory loss. It's hard for me to concentrate, hard for me to retain information like I used to. So
you're seeing those long-term effects even though you've been clean for more than 2 years now.
Almost 2 years.
Tell me a little bit more about the rave scene, about those kinds of more social consequences, if you will.
It's like you develop this sense of carefree attitude, you know, let's let loose and just get along, and everybody loves each other, and, you know, that empathy feeling that they were saying earlier, I can relate to. And of course, you know, you do end up doing things that you wouldn't do with a sober mind, and a lot of regrets, you know, the next day and just stuff like that.
Adam, a question for you now. How did you begin using ecstasy?
Well, first I started off smoking pot, drinking when I was 12, and then I started smoking because it was acceptable with everyone. Everyone was doing it, and then eventually that wasn't really doing it for me, so I started experimenting with other drugs, and eventually I found ecstasy. And I started ecstasy when I was 15, and I used it a lot because everybody was doing it, and it was okay to do it.
Are there different brands or different types you look for?
You can go on for hours naming every single pill, and each pill had a different kind of feeling to them. Either it was speedy, or made you a little more dopier, or they gave you different kinds of effects.
Was ecstasy hard to get?
No, that was probably the easiest drug to get next to marijuana, because it was in such high demand. Everyone wanted it.
Well, what kind of effects did the drug give you in terms of like the next day?
I would just lie in bed all day, be tired, want to sleep, very irritable. Everything got me upset. I got into fights with my parents, my brother, my sister really easily. It just made me so depressed and like irritable. I didn't want to deal with anything.
Well, Katie mentioned it had an impact on her schoolwork. How about you?
I couldn't really concentrate in school, and it didn't, at the time, it didn't click in my head that it was the E, but it was, because before then I was fine. I was able to concentrate. I could take things in easy. I was a pretty good student.
Is the word on the street that ecstasy can cause problems?
Yeah, in the streets, like, I'd hear people telling me, like, oh, they have trouble concentrating in school because of it. I'd see it on TV. But it didn't really click in my head, because as a user, I didn't care. It was just such a great feeling that the drug gave me that it didn't matter. I didn't want to think 10 years down the line that my mind would be messed up. I wouldn't be able to concentrate or anything. I didn't think it would happen to me anyway.
So sometimes that information on the street about the downside may not be very believable, I would guess.
No, it's not.
You were mandated by a court to go into treatment. How did that work out?
I started treatment, and I had to be in there because of probation. But at first it was like, I'm not a drug addict, and I didn't care about it, and I still continued using drugs.
So you thought you were in control, not the drugs at that point still?
Yeah, it was hard for me to think of myself as a drug addict, because I see so many other people using it twice as much as me, or I see people shooting dope or sniffing so much coke and doing all this crazy stuff that I didn't think just popping pills was such a big deal.
We're going to come back to you and ask more questions about advice for parents, but meanwhile what we'd like to do is to share a segment of videotape from a former NFL star player with the San Diego Chargers, who is now a coach and assistant principal in a school just outside Portland, Oregon. He's going to tell us a bit more about the use of ecstasy at the high school level, and also denial by parents. People used to think that ecstasy as a drug was one that was limited to rave dances, but what we're finding is that even at our high school dances, and even during the regular school day, we're finding students that are using ecstasy. The numbers of kids that we are catching at school, at our school, are significantly higher this year than they've been in the last couple of years. And of those kids, the number of kids, the proportion of those kids who have done ecstasy is significantly higher. Just to give you an idea, at a dance that we had recently, we nailed 17 kids for drug use, and all of those were ecstasy. I think parents are becoming more aware. I think that they have to, because it's starting to become such an issue. In the Portland area this past year, we've had 3 young people die from ecstasy. So it's becoming an issue that parents are more and more aware of. What advice would you give parents? Is it the paraphernalia, or is it the behavior? Katie, what would you tell parents to kind of watch for to see if their kids are using it?
Well, I think above anything, it's the behavioral signs, you know, the change in attitudes. I isolated a lot. I always wanted to be by myself. And Gosh, there's just lots of signs, you know. I stopped being interested in the things that I was interested in before, and just my whole mood, it was like a completely different person, you know.
Did that have an impact on your family? How did your family handle it?
At first my family wasn't aware. After a while, all the arguments we started getting into, it pretty much separated my family, because not only was I arguing with them, but it was causing arguments between them, and it was like ruining my whole family. And it was bad, but I didn't care.
I've met your mother. She won't let go of you. She loves you very, very much. Tell us about that interaction and what you would tell parents.
It wasn't always like that until my mother realized that I do need that kind of attention, that I do need that. But basically parents should always stay as the parent role, maybe once in a while be their friend. But kids need sometimes to be kicked in the butt, per se, because they're not going to do anything unless you have an assertive voice, unless they just not fear you but respect you.
I just think that it's really important for parents to just get in there and, you know, set rules and, you know, the discipline, and I think it's really important.
Here's a question that's for Adam and Katie, but I want to ask Dr. Putnam about this as well. Again, the broader implications of drug and alcohol use. Is it easy to put things over on your parents? And I guess part of our assumption is that young people sometimes can manipulate your parents. And Katie and Adam talked before about parents wanting to be their kids' friends, not their parents. Do we see across broader public health arenas?
Absolutely. One of the most important protective factors for kids, alcohol and drug use, is parental supervision, and also other extracurricular activities and involvement in sports and so on. But parental supervision is right up there as one of the key protectors, and the sense that it's their room and privacy is very important. Obviously that's important, but there's a limit to it. If you are concerned, it seems to be the time to ask some of those important questions, and if you love your child, it's not an issue of privacy anymore.
What about that issue, invasion of privacy? Did your parents ever kind of take apart your room or look at that? Was that you probably hated it at the time. What are your thoughts now?
Actually, I remember I got so bad that my parents had to remove my door. At first, they removed the doorknob so they can open my door real easily, but then I didn't even deserve the door. So they took that away, you know. It was weird. But my parents were like, it's very easy to get over your parents, especially if you're so addicted and so love the drug so much. You'll find any ways or means to put one over on your parents. And drug addicts are very conniving and do whatever it takes to have the parents give them money without them knowing they're spending it on drugs.
How did you afford to pay this much money?
At first, I was borrowing money from my parents. You know, Dad, can I borrow $20 to go to the movies? Instead, I go to my friend's house, pop pills, sniff, do whatever. Eventually, I became such a fiend that I didn't even realize it at the time. I started stealing from family members, stealing from people in the outside world. You know, a drug addict can come up with millions and millions of ways to find money for their addiction.
Katie, what about you?
Oh, I too did all of that. I, you know, the pawning of stuff, either it be mine or my parents. You know, I got good at forging checks of my parents. I stole from them, you know, right out of their wallets, because I was unemployable. I didn't know how to keep a job. You know, I depended on other people to supply my habit, you know.
So again, these are kind of some of the signs of drug use that parents could pick up on if there's a demand for a lot of money, in effect, or money missing from wallets or something like that. Adam, your thoughts on what parents should watch for?
It is important for parents to be involved, even though, like me, I pushed my parents away and I told them it's none of your business, you don't need to worry, but it is their business and they do have to show that they care about you. So the parents should be involved no matter how much their kids push them away.
Gosh, I just can't say enough how much it's so important for the parents to just be involved, you know, and be aware of what's going on, and to just, you know, get involved in their kids' lives. If it wasn't for my family, I don't know if I'd be here. You know, they were very very stubborn, and they were gonna, get me help if it took everything. They had to do everything, and they just didn't stop. So
How did you feel about that at the time?
I couldn't stand my parents. I blamed them. I wanted to blame everyone but myself. And until I realized, now I'm so thankful. I'm so grateful for them. But at the time, I thought that they were the meanest people in the world. They just wanted to save me, though.
We're just about out of time, but we wanted to give all our panelists a moment to make any final closing comment, any take-home message for everyone.
There's a lot of things we don't know about this drug because we haven't had a chance to study them, and that's even more scary than the things that we do know about it.
Kids look to parents. They look to adults as role models. They look to us. And how we think about, talk about, and deal with our own drug use, alcohol and other drug use, is also critical.
Parents do have a lot of denial with the fact that their kids are using drugs. They think, oh, my kid's a straight-A student. They do this, they're involved in that, and involved in that. And it's just a front kids put to hide who they really are sometimes. And parents should always be involved and should always back their child up.
We need to start by looking at ourselves and, our own families. And I really think that denial is just so strong right now, and it keeps us from, many parents from saving their kids' lives, because my parents would be the first to say that they just didn't think that I would turn out this way, or have a problem. And so just to get real and to take this seriously.
You're both really to be commended. We do have some sources of further information for you, as we promised at the outset. We've got some slides on the screen in a moment here. There's several new publications that are really up-to-date information about ecstasy and particularly other club drugs. We have, first of all, the Pulse Check, which is put out by the Office of National Drug Control Policy. The issue this time is a special topic, ecstasy and other club drugs. Phone number is 800-666-3332. And then a source of publications on various topics, including ecstasy and club drugs, is the National Clearinghouse for Alcohol and Drug Information. They have a new particular publication called Tips for Teens, and they have other information as well. 800-729-6686. Also, the National Institute on Drug Abuse has a special web page. That's bright, new, science-based information. It's really top quality. Now, information for parents on these drugs and how to talk to kids about drugs would be this number, 800-788-2800. We have materials actually in 7 different languages. So in closing, let me thank everybody who has been involved with the broadcast. Thanks for joining us today, and goodbye.